Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Alex Beyond Thoughts podcast with me, your host, Alex. Welcome in. In today's episode, I wanted to make a really quick one on the more technical side of podcasting, specifically with guests. Now, this is a little bit rogue for what I normally record about. However, it's a question slash thing that is quite prominent in my whole Alex Beyond Thoughts brand and things like that, especially on the podcast here with you guys. So yeah, it's just kind of something that I get praised on from guests and listeners. And it's important to people listening and to people being interviewed that their questions and the things that would intrigue them are both asked on and and answered. So, as a guest, when you're being interviewed on a podcast, it's really important that the questions are things you want to answer on, and it's a question that you would want to be asked. And as a listener, it's really important that it's just intriguing and interesting. And it's also a question that they would probably have leading on from a topic or like a bit of information that they would want to know from this person specifically. So, this is a slightly, not necessarily technical, but a more detailed overview of how I prep and plan and think about pretty much asking good questions. That's pretty much the crux of podcasting with guests. So, really, I'm going to split this into kind of two main topics. The first one being how to ask good questions. The second one is why asking good questions gets you booked back and helps you retain more viewers. So, going into the first one immediately, how to ask good questions. The main thing here is that listening is key. Write it down, full stop, underline, exclamation mark. Listening is key. You can only ask good questions when you listen intently to understand, not just to quiz. Like, you're not just 20 questions and the next answer and the next answer and the next answer. You are listening to understand what they're saying, to comprehend it, to have forward thoughts from what they're saying, not just a pre-prepared list of questions. You, as the host, your main job is to ask key questions and to listen intently. So I feel like as a podcast host, if you are new to it or you aren't super experienced in conversation, like in a recorded format, in a style like this, then you can pretty easily get lost in just okay, they've told me that. So I've kind of been so focused on what I'm going to ask next that I didn't really listen to what they're saying. So I'm just going to ask the next question. And you miss out on a bunch of great value following the surface answer. Now, the surface answer isn't to say that they gave you a bunch of bull. like, it's not to say that they didn't say everything they needed to say. It's just this was the first answer. This is the first thing that came to mind, or it was the first thing they prepped if they knew the kind of questions you were thinking about asking. So your first answer is always your surface level answer. Now, there is always something you can pick out of that to follow on deeper, whether that's you need to follow up with a question or whether you just pick out that key moment and say, oh, I really liked that. That's a really interesting way of thinking, of talking, of moving, of doing whatever. That is when you start creating great conversation because you're immediately building rapport with your guest and with your audience that you are actually listening to. You are actually engaged and invested and intrigued in this conversation as well. And it makes them free up a little bit more and get a bit more relaxed into a conversational style rather than just an interview. Now, obviously, if you are just in an interview and you just need them to answer these specific questions, if you're in like a press junket or something, that makes more sense. However, in a conversational style podcast where you're wanting to have some kind of lengthy, deeper, meaningful dialogue between two people and your listeners, that listening element and the understanding element is so key. So that is kind of your main point. And really, we could just stop the podcast there and say, okay, that's all you need to go focus on right now. Listen and ask good questions and pick out the things that you need to think about whilst you're in this conversation, but still flow with it. You're still trying to listen to understand, not just to ask them the next question and quiz. This kind of leads into the next point, which is knowing enough about your guests, but still having natural questions, like a very new viewer or new consumer of this person would also have for them. When it's like your best friend, it's very easy to just like think everyone else knows everything through and through as well. So you'll probably be talking about some law that happened when you were like 13 and no one else knows what you're talking about. When you're interviewing someone, especially if you are familiar with them, you followed them for a while, whatever, whatever, people that have no idea who this person is will have natural questions that you need to make sure you hit. So you need to know about enough about your guest to have these questions and have these natural questions, but also have like the deeper level. If you've not even Googled them once, they're going to know. They're going to know that you don't know anything about their business or about their ethos or about the things that they talk about on the internet. They're going to know very quickly that you have not done even a singular inch of research into them. If you didn't know what their business name was, or the fact that they had children, or the fact that they earned this much money and they publicly talk about it, or that they had this massive breakup scandal online and it's an elephant in the room for every time they have an interview on a podcast, like these kind of things you should know as the podcast host and as the person directing and leading this kind of conversation. So you both need to know enough about them that you understand the lore of this person, understand the background and the context to what they might be saying, so that you can even pick out more deeper, meaningful things, connect it back to their history so they have more to talk about. You need to know that, but you also need to keep in mind that someone who has never even heard the name of this person, they are going to have questions and a level of understanding that is vastly different to yours as someone who has done research on them already or knows them very well already. I love this next point. This next point means a lot to me, and it is pausing. I think pausing and having space to breathe and think in a podcast is a lost art. Slowing down in a conversation and thinking and allowing pauses and breaths and time to process a thought is a lost art. Let them speak and let them think. There has been so many times where I have left a pause or stayed silent and let it marinate for a couple seconds, maybe even up to 10 seconds, and like just nodded my head and like shown that I was digesting and thinking about what they were saying, that they then added the next nugget of truth or potency or like high vibrational stuff or like a very deep thought that wouldn't have come if I'd have just interrupted them and been afraid to have a pause in a moment. This isn't to say like after everything they say, you wait for something revolutionary to come like immediately next. But it does mean that when you're in a conversation about something particularly personal or something that is very unique to them or something that they may have something else to add to this to go a bit deeper, it is your job to pause and let them think and let them speak. I know so many people are just kind of afraid of that time that is just in limbo and you feel like you need to fill that space, but it is a golden space. That 5 or 10 second moment of when you're just connecting with them and letting it sit of whatever they've just said, whether it's a personal thing or a business thing or whatever, whatever, letting it sit in the moment, fully digesting it, giving yourself time to just listen intently and understand, not just quiz them. This is where so much good stuff comes. This is where so many layers deeper comes. This is where all the unintentionally beautiful stuff in a podcast comes because there is time to have secondary thoughts. It's like, okay, well, I just told you about this process I use to help me reach my goals. But actually, a second thought I had is that sometimes that isn't important. Sometimes it's actually supporting myself through this thing. Sometimes it's saying no to this thing, etc., etc. Like, take whatever example you want. I could have just shared a recipe and you go, oh, amazing. 10-second pause. You know what? I do have an ebook that is for free. I can share it with everyone. Like, you wouldn't necessarily have had that offer had you not allowed them the time to sit and think. or the extra recipe or whatever, whatever. Like, give people time to speak and think, and you will have many, many more encounters of delicious, gorgeous nuggets of information and depth that you may not have had if you were just quizzing and you were just interviewing in like a pundit style. The final part of this, like how to ask good questions, to keep it as brief as I can, pick out specific responses they give that give you more questions or help you understand something better. Like clarifying and reiterating helps solidify your concepts. So if they just told you of a 4 step process, pick out a question that you would probably have as a follow up, whether that's with a completely new person who has never heard of this process before, or someone quite deep in it and you know a lot about it. Pick out a question that would lead to something more, that's going to help clarify the concept, that's going to help reiterate it. So we solidify that for the viewers so they don't have to like go back and listen. It's just repeated for them in either a simpler way or just a more digestible way, whatever, to just help solidify these concepts because we hear it once and it's like, oh, cool. Wait, what did that mean? Oh, I think I missed out on step 3 because I wasn't listening properly. And you can just pick out that question and go, oh, so that thing in step 2 of that process that you were talking about, what is it about that helps you more or helps you less or changes the thing, whatever it is, and just pick specific responses that they give that is going to lead that conversation to understanding something better for yourself and the viewers. Because you can guarantee if you're confused, so is your viewer. Because a lot of the time when we're finding people on podcasts, this is one of our first times ever encountering them. Unless you're going to someone news podcast to listen to your same person talk again and again, the majority of people you're encountering, anyway, whatever the English word is there, they are probably brand new to at least half of your audience. So if you're confused, they are. Understand something better by asking questions, clarify it, reiterate it, and help your audience solidify the concepts, the themes, the thoughts going on in your podcast. Okay, that is the how to ask your questions pretty much wrapped up. That is my 4 kind of key points to nailing this. Now, now let's look at why asking good questions gets you booked back and why it helps you retain more viewers. Now, this should be really quick, but if you are great at prompting and responding, guests want to have you in conversation again. If you are a good conversationalist in your podcast, guests want to come back or they want to have you on their podcast. Probably 8 to 9 times out of 10, if someone is featuring on your podcast, they probably have one of their own or they have a platform of their own, whether it's a YouTube or they go live on Instagram a lot, etc., etc. They will probably want to have you in conversation again because they know it's going to provide value. And whether that's value for just entertainment, you just had a great laugh, whether it was that you asked it questions and they got like layers deeper and it was valuable for the audience and yours, whether it was that they just really vibed with you because you were a great conversationalist and you were interesting to talk to, they would want to book you back again because an interesting person to talk to makes for an interesting episode. So when you focus on these things like prompting and responding, leaving pauses, knowing enough about your guest to ask natural questions, and making sure you're listening so you can fully understand what they're saying, this helps you get booked back. This helps you retain more viewers because you know, as a viewer, listening to the podcast episode that you're interviewing on, I'm going to get my questions answered. I'm going to follow the flow of conversation. It's going to be intriguing. It's going to be interesting. They're not going to frustrate me by cutting off the person being interviewed every 3 seconds with some inane comment. Like, people want to listen to it again. And the second thing here is that listeners want to hear what you specifically have to ask other guests. So this helps retain your viewership. They are comfortable knowing that you'll actually hold a good and informative conversation where they don't know exactly where it's going. They don't know that You're going to ask probably four exact questions. They don't know that it's going to be in this exact order every time. There's some kind of predictability, whether you have segments or something like that. But they know for a fact that if they listen to your podcast, it's going to hold their attention. It's going to be informative or entertaining, and they are not going to be able to predict exactly what's going to happen next. This is because you are great at prompting and responding. This is because you're great at listening. This is because you're great at asking good questions. So people want to come back and listen. They're willing to listen to new guests that they have no idea who they are, what they do, why it would be important for them to listen to them. They're willing to click on that episode because they know, regardless of who it is, you are going to make it a good conversation and it's going to provide value in some way. Whether it is a nugget of information, whether it's just a good old time, whether it is the fact that they're going to feel that spark of motivation or inspiration or collect some kind of educational knowledge. They know that if they listen to you, you are going to ask great questions and you are going to create an episode of content that is enjoyable to consume. And this helps you retain more viewers. This helps you get booked back. Because again, the guest that you are interviewing can see your metrics. They know that you get retaining viewership quite regularly. So if you spread some of that magic over onto their podcast, they learn something, their viewers learn something. It's great for both of you. They want to have you back. They want to have a conversation again. So I feel like there was one thing that was floating in my brain to add. So you might have like a weird cut when I remember it, and I'll come back on and tell you this. But if it doesn't come back to me, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Alex Beyond Thoughts podcast. I hope you got something valuable out of this. I think asking great questions, listening, and retaining the lost art of pausing is going to change your podcasting game. I'm so proud of you if you are podcasting right now, if you are grinding and creating content and inviting people on your podcast to speak, because it is daunting, it is scary, and having the responsibility of being the person as the interviewer and the one leading and holding the conversation, it is a lot of responsibility and you feel pressure to create a great piece of content. But I know that if you're listening to this and you're trying, you are going to smash it out of the park. I believe in you. I love you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, morning, afternoon, evening, walk, drive, whatever you're up to, usually in the gym when I'm listening to a podcast. So I hope you're having a great gym session if you are like me. I will see you in the next episode of the Alex Beyond Thoughts podcast. Bye, guys.